Welcome to From the Therapy Room, a space where we slow down, where we turn inward, where we make sense of what feels confusing inside us. This is not a space for quick fixes, this is a space for understanding. Because when we understand ourselves deeply, we suffer differently, and at times we suffer less rather. Our body is really amazing. Our body really keeps the score for everything. If the memory of trauma is encoded in the viscera and heartbreaking and gut wrenching sensations, in autoimmune disorders and skeletal or muscular problems, and if these sensations are reactivated by current experiences, then the past is alive in the present. What I have stated just now, you must have guessed, probably some of you at least, that what I'm going to talk today. Today we are going to talk about emotional flashbacks when the past lives in the present. Today we are going to talk about something that many people experience, but very few can name it. Emotional flashbacks, or as I like to say, when the past quietly walks into the present and sits in your nervous system. First, let's try to understand what is an emotional flashback actually. So, when we hear the word flashback, we often imagine dramatic scenes, war memories, visual replays, or cinematic reliving. But emotional flashbacks are different. They are not visual, they are not cinematic, they are felt. Suddenly, without any clear reason, you feel small, you feel ashamed, you feel rejected, you feel abandoned, you feel terrified of losing someone. You feel like you have done something terribly wrong. And the intensity is disproportionate to the current moment. You are now reacting to now. You are reacting to then. But your nervous system cannot tell the difference. Emotional flashbacks are often rooted in developmental trauma, repeated emotional experiences in childhood where the child felt unsafe, unseen, criticized, rejected, abandoned, overwhelmed, or responsible for other emotions. Unlike single event trauma, this is relational trauma, chronic, the kind that shapes our identity. Researchers like Bessel van der Kolk explain that trauma is not the event itself, it is what happens inside the nervous system where there is no safe other to help process the experience. You're not remembering with images, you're remembering with emotion. Neuroscience tells us that the amygdala stores emotional memory. When triggered, it activates before the rational brain, before the prefrontal cortex can evaluate context. This is why, logically, something is small, but our body reacts as if it is life threatening. Now, let's talk what it feels like actually. An emotional flashback might feel like sudden shame after mild criticism. It can feel like panic when someone does not reply to the message, or intense fear of abandonment when a partner needs a space, or collapse into worthlessness after a small mistake, or feeling like a child when someone raises their voice. It is not overreaction, it is time collapse. The past and present merge, and the body cannot differentiate between them two. But the major question is here: how to identify, how how it shows up actually. So for that, I think, let me take you inside the therapy room for a brief. A client once said to me, I know he just said that he's tired, but I suddenly felt like I'm too much, like I should disappear. And as she spoke, her voice became smaller, shoulders curled inward, and eyes dropped. And in that moment, she was not a 35-year-old woman. She was a 7-year-old girl whose emotional needs overwhelmed her exhausted mother. The trigger was not the partner, the trigger was the emotional memory. And in therapy, we gently slow down these moments. We simply ask, what does this feeling remind you of? Or like we simply ask means like I ask to whom I'm talking in those moments. Like, what does this feeling remind you of? Or when you have felt this before, or probably often, tears arrives because the body remembers everything. When we try to talk about it, time is not linear inside us. Past lead to present, present leads to future, but psychologically, time is layered, and we imagine time as linear. And what happened? That unprocessed experiences do not remain in past. They lived in our implicit memory. They wait for resonance, and when the present resembles the past, even in a subtle way, the nervous system reactivates. It's not weakness, it's a survivor intelligence where the body says, I have been here before, I must protect you. Even if protection now look like withdrawal, anger, clinginess, shutdown, or even people pleasing. We create so many narratives actually. And emotional flashbacks often come with powerful narratives. Something like, I'm too much, or I'm not enough, or I'll be abandoned, or I must not make mistakes, or I'm lovable, or I have to earn love, or why I'm always wrong, or I am always wrong. So try to see here, try to understand here that these are not thoughts formed yesterday. These are conclusions a child once made to survive emotionally. A child cannot think my parent is emotionally unavailable. A child thinks something must be wrong with me. And at that moment, that beliefs, that belief that something must be wrong with me becomes identity. And that identity becomes trigger sensitive. Now, there are so many other things because, like, if we talk about attachment theory from this perspective, researchers in attachment theories, particularly some famous psychologists or psychiatrists work like John Bowlby or Mary Answorth, shows that early attachment experiences shape internal working models. Internal working models are essentially what I expect from others, what I expect from myself, and what I believe about love. So, when present relationship activate old attachment wounds, emotional flashbacks surface. You're not reacting to your partner, you are reacting to your attachment history. But why it feels so real if we are really reacting to attachment history? Because it is real. It was real once. Your nervous system encoded it as danger. Neuroscience studies show that emotional memory network activate bodily states similar to original experiences. It's going to make so many changes like heart rate changes, breathing shifts, muscles contract, voice tone alters. The body is not dramatic, it's simply remembering. And emotional flashbacks are often triggered by a number of things like silence, or if there'll be any change in tone while the person is speaking, or some sort of perceived criticism or conflict, or when the person is feeling like being ignored, or if they are authority figures. I mean, not everyone, but some other things for some or other people. There are individual differences are going to be there. I'm just trying to mention a couple of them, and some sort of emotional withdrawal, or comparison, or failure. Sometimes even success, because visibility once felt unsafe, or even intimacy, because closeness once led to hurt. It is not the event, it is the meaning is stored in the body. I think another question which is popping up in my head is like that, like when I was talking about the trigger. What happens if we don't recognize it? I mean, it's okay that they are the things, the kind of things are happening inside our head, but what will happen if I'm not able to identify those things? If kind of unrecognized emotional flashback leads to relationship sabotage or over apologizing or emotional shutdown or rage outbursts, or it leads at times chronic shame. It can also lead to anxiety disorder, depression, some sort of, it can make you feel low, I mean, and it can make you anxious, it can make you worrisome, and some sort of repetitive relational patterns too. Because we keep reacting from a younger version of ourselves. And we don't even realize it. So when emotional flashbacks become, I mean, somehow some something else, there is something important to kind of understand here. Like emotional flashbacks are not just uncomfortable reactions. When they remain unrecognized and unregulated for years, they can crystallize into what we later call mental health concerns, issues, and all those things. Let's gently connect some dots here. As chronic emotional flashbacks often look like anxiety disorders. If nervous system is repeatedly scanning for abandonment, criticism, or danger, you will live in hypervigilance. That's generalized anxiety. If a specific relational cues triggers intense fear, that can look like social anxiety. And if your body is constantly bracing for threat, panic attacks may emerge. And when a person repeatedly experiences emotional flashbacks of shame, worthlessness, or emotional abandonment over time, the system collapses. Hyperarousal, and all those things. So instead of anxiety, you feel numbness. Instead of fear, you feel emptiness. And if we can put it in terms of depression, depression is often the nervous system saying, I cannot fight anymore. And a childhood environment of unpredictability or harsh criticism can wire the brain to seek certainty. So we start doing some sort of, compulsion kind of thing. That compulsion then become attempts to regulate unbearable internal anxiety. At times, emotional flashback can attach to intrusive kind of fears also. Even if we are going to see some other things where emotional flashbacks are frequent, I mean, trauma does not cause, I won't say that some particular like disorders, mental health disorders, but emotional dysregulation from trauma can intensify mood cycling, like we see it in bipolar disorder or mood disorder kind of thing. I'm not saying that this is only responsible. No, I'm just trying to make the connection that when and what is happening, and then how it's leading, or rather how it is adding to other mental health concerns. And of course, PTSD and complex trauma are deeply intertwined with emotional flashbacks. But here is the compassionate truth: these diagnoses are not character defects, they are nervous system adaptations. That's how I look at them. I'm not denying any kind of neuroscience or something, but it gives us, it provides somehow another perspective to look at them so that we can help the person and we can understand the person from a different perspective and help him or her. When we treat only the symptoms like anxiety, compulsions, or shutdown or mood swings without addressing the emotional flashback underneath, healing feels partial. But when we gently work at the level of emotional memory, something reorganizes at the root and symptoms often soften. Not because we forced them to, but because we finally listened to what they were protecting. And I want to say something very clearly here. Not even anxiety disorder is caused by emotional flashbacks. No, that's not what I'm trying to communicate it here. Not every depression is rooted in childhood trauma. Not every case of OCD or bipolar disorder is trauma response. Mental health conditions are complex. They involve genetics, neurobiology, temperament, environment, and life stressor. There are many more things rather involved. What I'm naming here is a couple of them. Trauma is one piece of puzzle. Sometimes a central piece, sometimes a contributing one, and sometimes not primary driver at all. The intention here is not to reduce everything to trauma, it is to widen our lens rather. Because when emotional memory is part of the story and we ignore it, treatment can feel incomplete. And when biology is part of the story and we ignore it, compassion can become distorted. Truth healing is integrative. It honors brain chemistry, it honors lived experiences, it honors attachment, it honors resilience, and most importantly, it honors complexity. Healing emotional flashbacks is not about eliminating triggers. It's mostly about increasing awareness and regulation. In therapy, kind of we work on three layers. Number one, naming it, like this feels like an emotional flashback. So when we are going to name what it is, this helps. Naming reduce fusion. And another thing, like orienting to the present, like how old are you right now, or where are you, or is this person the same as the person from your childhood? So obviously this activates our prefrontal cortex. And reparenting the younger self is really very important. So instead of shaming the reaction, we say, of course you feel this way. This makes sense because compassion reorganized memory. Studies in self compassion research show that warmth toward oneself reduces threat response and increase emotional resilience. Let's try to do a small practice kind of thing here. If you're listening this right now, think about the last time you overreacted, not to judge yourself, just to observe. And ask yourself gently, what was I really afraid of in that moment? Or how old did I feel? Or what did I need that I didn't receive back then? Place your hand on your chest and say quietly to yourself, this feeling is old. I'm safe now. And try to notice that shift, that how he changes the whole thing. Something small I have just tried to weave in during our conversation. I have seen while I talk or interact with people, sometimes people fear. What if I am just being dramatic? There is a difference between conscious manipulation and unconscious trauma activation. Emotional flashbacks are not strategic, they are involuntary. The work is not to blame yourself, but to take responsibility for healing. There is power in that. Let's just try to see emotional flashback from a different layer also. At times, emotional flashbacks are invitations, not punishments. They are unfinished conversation before your present self and your younger self. When you meet them with awareness instead of shame, something sacred happens. Time integrates, and you stop abandoning yourself the way others once did. So, healing is not becoming trigger free, healing is becoming self connected during the trigger. Let me bring an example here. A client constantly feared a time. I mean, I have seen in my therapy room that uh, feared overwhelming others. And in sessions, whenever she cried, she apologized. So one day I gently asked, Who taught you that your emotions are too much? She froze. Literally, she froze. She took some time. And then she whispered, "My father used to leave the room when I cried." And there it was. Every time someone emotionally withdrew, her body said, "You are too much. Stop it." That was not immaturity, that was adaptation. Over time, as she experienced someone staying present during her tears, her nervous system updated, not intellectually, but experientially. This is how emotional flashbacks heal, through corrective emotional experiences. So, when you understand emotional flashbacks, you stop making global conclusions about your own identity. Instead of "I'm insecure," you say "I'm triggered." And instead of "this relationship is unsafe," you ask, "Is this about now or then?" And that pause is liberation here. The most powerful moment in healing is this, that when you are triggered, and instead of collapsing, attacking, or running, you stay. You breathe, you name it, you feel it, you choose differently. That's that is integration. That is adulthood reclaiming childhood. Emotional flashbacks are not sign that you're broken. They are sign that part of you were once alone and now they don't have to be. When the past lives in the present, it is not here to control you, it is here to be witnessed. And every time you witness yourself with compassion, you rewrite memory. Thank you for sitting in this space with me today. If something resonated, don't rush away from it. Stay with it, reflect, journal, observe your pattern gently this week, and remember, understanding yourself is not self indulgence, it is self responsibility. I will meet you again in the next episode. Until then, be curious about your inner world. It is wiser than you think. See you from the therapy room. I'll be just sitting right with you. Take care.